this art experience, we're going to go back to Claire's painting Senecio. This particular painting has a few influences, one being Cubism, African art, the art of children, and Claire also put his own sense of humour into the work. The art elements that we're going to be looking at are form, colour and shape. This is for upper levels 5 and 6, and we're going to take a 2D picture and teach them how to pull it out and turn it into a 3D artwork. The art equipment that we're going to be using is, let's see, we're going to need newspaper, a tube, solid tube, a poly block, masking tape. We're going to work with plaster or mod rock, scissors and Magiclay and some paints. I'll talk about the paints later when we get to it. So because it is sculpture, there's going to be 2 parts to this activity. The first part will be building the armature and the second part will be the painting. Let's begin with the armature. So we take the poly block, which is an excellent base, the tube and newspaper, and basically all we want to do is make a head shape, a round shape, and attach it all together. So to do this, just take your newspaper and scrunch. Now, that is probably too small, so your students just add another piece. So that's 3 pieces. And I'm going to go for 1 more. So let's just say 4 pieces of newspaper. Doesn't have to be perfect. A nice ball, and now we just need to hold that together with the masking tape. Okay, so you've got a nice round shape. 1 more piece. Okay. We're going to attach these 3 things together. So I think I would attach the tube first. Just take the masking tape again and run it onto the tube. Now make sure students don't do this and they attach it like this, leaving a gap. You want the masking tape to go right in and down. And I've seen students do that gap and then it becomes a problem when they're plastering. So this just needs to be taped just so it's holding still, and we'll make it stronger later. So that's 2 pieces. Okay, so that's just held in place. And same again. This is a little bit trickier because it's not flat. Work out where you want that shape. I always say to the students, if you can hold your work upside down and it doesn't fall apart, that's good enough. So that's 4 pieces again, and I'm going to give my work the same test. I'm going to hold that upside down and it hasn't fallen apart yet. So there we go. So that is the armature. Now we've got to make it strong, so we're going to plaster. So we use mod rock. We don't want the pieces, I'm just going to move that out the way. You need to cut your Mod Rock into, I do 2 different sizes, a larger size and a smaller size. Students can cut their own, or you can have it pre-cut and organised. Now you do need to discuss this next point with students, where to start. If they start the Mod Rock up the top, which is sort of what they want to do because that's easier, it will become top heavy and that's not a good thing, it can fall apart. So I always tell them to Mod Rock the joints. So this is a joint, I would start with joint 1, the tube to the block, Mod Rock, joint 2, Mod Rock the head to the tube, and then the head last. And for some reason, the students really love to Mod Rock the tube. The tube is already strong. It doesn't need much Mod Rock. It's more the head and the joints. So I had one student that spent a long time doing this over and over again, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is to make sure it's all attached nicely together. So with the Mod Rock, you just want to wet it. Start with the joint. Half over the tube and half over the poly block, and gently rub and smooth that over. And the second piece, that should overlap, and the overlapping will give it strength. So I take my next piece and I overlap it, half on the tube, half on the poly block, overlapping the first piece. Smoothing it over. When I finish this, I'm going to do the next joint. So I'm going to continue on with this right now and make sure everything's plastered neatly for the next stage. Now, when you're using Mod Rock or plaster wrap, can be called different things, you need to make sure that there's not too much water, so make sure you wet it and just let it drip for a second. Make sure when you apply it that it is smoothed over, and also make sure that each part, like sometimes you get a little part that sticks up, make sure you do push all the parts so they're nice and flat, because we're trying to create a really nice, smooth form to work on. You don't want the room too hot because it can dry too quickly, and you don't want it too wet. So, okay, so I've come to an end here. So that seems all to be plastered properly. Everything's connected. It's sitting nicely. It's 3D, so you always get the students to turn it and check all the way around. Make sure everything's smooth and nice, and then set that aside to dry. The Mod Rock takes about 24 hours to dry, so I've set that aside and I've got one that's half done. Now we want the students to add the facial features. It can be in an abstract form, which I'll explain in a second. We're about to add Magiclay to the sculpture, and we're looking at adding a few facial features, a nose, an eye or 2 eyes, an eyebrow or an ear. This is abstract, so we don't actually need it to be perfect or in the right position. So you might want to run through with the students how to make these shapes. So the Magiclay, which is lovely and soft, I start with a circle, and to make a nose I'd be looking at a triangle shape, which just a matter of squeezing and pulling like this. And obviously if you want a longer nose, you pull it up higher. If you want it shorter, you squeeze. And if you don't like it, you roll and start again. So rolling, making that triangle shape. And then students will attach that to their sculpture and smooth over the edges to make sure it sticks. Same with the eyes. You're looking at a nice leaf shape, so maybe create a sausage and then push that down into the sculpture and play with it a little bit. If you wanted to add an eyeball, you'd just take a little bit more Magiclay and maybe a circle on top. Now take a bit of Magiclay and just add your nose, and then you just smooth that over. And now I can add the shape by squeezing, pressing. That gave it height as well. So there's a nose. When you're happy, stop. If you're not happy, you can pull it off and start again. And I've got a little bit of an ear shape, but I'm going to extend that and smooth the Magiclay so it goes into the dry Mod Rock, and then that will just become one. So I'm going to extend an ear shape. And the eye shape is a real, not a circle, a real leaf shape. So you can shape that in your hand first and then put it on. That's too big, so I can pull a bit off. And that's going to give it a nice bit of height. Once the sculpture is complete and you're happy with the way it's looking, we're going to talk about paint. The reason why I've chosen to use Vipond's paint is because it's got an inbuilt gloss. But if you haven't used Vipond's paint before, you need to be aware of a few things. One is the brushes need to be cleaned straight away because the gloss will solidify the brush. Also, it doesn't come out of the students' clothes if you get paint on their clothes, so they will need to wear an apron. Now, when I look at the painting, I can see these geometric shapes. You can see a semicircle, squares, a triangle, and that's what we want the students to imitate. So you need to point that out. Now, we were using the Magiclay, and when I go to paint, my Magiclay isn't dry, but that doesn't matter because you can work onto wet Magiclay as long as you're gentle. Now, the painting process, we're going to look at warm colours, and it is worth the students making a practice sheet for the painting so they get those skills up before they go on to their sculpture. Now, the practice sheet, I would get the students to create a sheet of shapes that are tinted white, for example. I'm going to get a triangle and just use a little bit of colour. Now they can change that colour by adding a tiny bit of another colour if they like and blending that in. And then attach a shape to the shape. So there is a triangle, and now I'm going to attach a semicircle. I'm going to play with an experimental page in colour, tinting and shape. That's what I'm going to do now. The reason why we're making a cheat sheet or a rough copy or an experimental sheet is it's very easy to paint 2D, but not always so easy to paint 3D. We really want the students to have an opportunity to explore the colours they're about to use, and also think about how shapes connect. And by working 2D first, that gives the students a chance to get their skills up and experiment with the colours. So that's what I've done. I've got triangles, rectangles, circles, semicircles. And now I'm going to try to apply these skills to my 3D work. So exactly the same. And I'm also going to try and get variety in colour by doing lights, the colour lighter and darker by adding the white. So now I can just start to apply shape and colour, which is very cubist. So students will need a couple of lessons to work on this, and when the paint's dry, you'll find that they can also put a shape over the top. The painting is going to make or break the sculpture. They need to have really clear colours and clear shapes to have success. So if you're using the Vipons, you will have a gloss that's inbuilt, so the work when it's finished will have a nice shine. But if you don't use Vipons, you can use normal acrylic paints, and I'm just going to go to a finished work that I've done and show you what you can do. So this is a finished work, not using Vipons, but I've used normal classroom acrylic paint, but I still want to have that shine. So what you can do is give it a gloss after the paint. So this is super gloss if you haven't used it before. Really easy to apply, and it's got fantastic effects. So there's my painted sculpture, and the gloss will bring out the colours.